Yeah,
Yeah.
or not.
There we go.
It's supposed to be recording, so hopefully that is true. In which case, welcome to Three Historians Talk About a Television Show that has nothing to do with history. Shrinking. I'm Sabrina Mittermeier. I'm currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Kassel, Germany. I do American history. I also do a lot of pop culture, so maybe for me this is closest to what I actually also research and work on, which is television. But we got to decided to do this, I think, because I don't know, we all like watching this, really. This is the reason, but we'll get into that in a second. But yes, with me are two very famous, at least in my circles, historians. Eric, who are you?
Hi, I'm Eric Rauchway. I'm a professor of history at the University of California at Davis, far from the part of California in which shrinking takes place, but nevertheless in the same general state of mind, I think. So I guess those are my qualifications for talking about it.
I'm Kevin Kruse. I'm a professor of history at Princeton University on the opposite coast. So I even have less connection to the world of shrinking. I just like really good TV.
That is a good enough reason. If there's people who decided to listen to this because of us, rather one of you probably, and are like, I don't know what the fuck Shrinking is. Shrinking is an Apple TV Plus show created by Bill Lawrence, Brett Goldstein, and Jason Segel. It is about therapy, in many ways. It is about, and I didn't close my email, so it's pinging. It is about a man called Jimmy, played by Jason Segel as well, who basically falls off the wagon after his wife is killed in a car crash. He has a teenage daughter that he kind of stops raising for a little bit. She then gets kind of raised by their neighbor. And Harrison Ford is in it. If anybody needs a selling point, who's his mentor, and then the show goes through, yeah, talking about like, I don't know, I guess forgiveness, redemption, grief, all kinds of fun stuff. And despite the very depressing topic, it is also very funny. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We maybe can all say kind of why we started watching it. So, I mean, it is good TV, but maybe what drew us to this or why we keep watching it. There's my cat. I started watching it because I was a fan of the people making it before that. So, Bill Lawrence and Brett Goldstein had done Ted Lasso together, and we're actually still doing Ted Lasso while this started airing in 2023. And then the other weird thing that happened for me was that I was in a mental health institution in exactly the 9 weeks the first season of Shrinking aired, and I was like, okay, so you're in a mental health clinic and there's this new show coming up by people you like that talks about therapy. So I started writing recaps of it every week, and it turned into this kind of diary of my time in a day clinic for depression. And it was great actually. I the weirdest thing is I did enjoy my time in this hospital. I made friends there. It was a very good experience. And it was nice to kind of have that show that oddly always talked about very similar things that I ended up talking about with the people I was in therapy with my therapist, whatever. So obviously the therapist there did not behave like the therapist in Shrinking. But yeah, this is how I really got into this, and then I ended up still recapping the other two seasons that have come out since without being hospitalized at the same time. But yeah, why did you guys start watching this other than
Well,
hey?
it's interesting that you point out the Ted Lasso connection. As you
Yeah.
know, Ted Lasso became kind of a phenomenon because it aired during the pandemic and everybody needed something, nice. And this was the show that dared to ask, what if a soccer coach was nice and kind? And what would happen then? And I think it is of a piece of the sort of the Bill Lawrence verse of television shows where he handles these themes of grief, as you say, very heavy duty stuff with a very light touch. Scrubs is like that too. but it's not. It takes place in a hospital. It's not afraid of dealing with death and loss, and of course, Scrubs also has the difficult, you know, protagonist father relationship to the mentor that is also a feature of
Mhm.
Shrinking. So I think it's of a piece with a lot of the kinds of themes that he deals with. So obviously that's all great. And as you say, Harrison Ford is in it, and it's grumpy Harrison Ford. And I think that this is, something that's revealed to me anyway, that this was actually the thing that I really liked about Indiana Jones and Han Solo is that they were always a little irritated about having to put up with this stuff. And now this is the perfect essence of those characters, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly the same here. I've always been a fan of Bill Lawrence's shows. Scrubs was a treat. Ted Lasso show. Now the Rooster, another one he's done, and they all have kind of that same vibe of, and it fits, I think, in the moment. The Ted Lasso was perfect for the pandemic, but I think his general vibe of there's kind of a really direct gallows humor that
Mm.
runs throughout all of them, right? In which people are confronting very hard things, but doing so with an incredibly wicked sense of humor. And that's the part that I think really stuck out for me with Shrinking. And I was kind of late to coming to Shrinking.
Mm.
My wife kept wanting to watch it, and I kept kind of, I don't know, I'm not really ready for the. It was about therapy, and I thought it was going to be a downer. I thought it was going to be a lot of kind of deep wallowing in the emotions. I didn't quite. I should have trusted Bill Lawrence to handle it well. But I was struck by the first episode and hooked from the start, where there were just several moments where I had to pause it. I was laughing too hard, and I just had to stop it to catch my breath. And that's what the times need, right? We need to confront the negative feelings, but also find a way out of them. And so it's a show about therapy, but the show itself is, I think, incredibly therapeutic.
Yeah, I think so. And it is, I mean, it is such a hard task, I think, to balance it that well. I mean, obviously they did similar on Ted Lasso, but I think just really diving into it and what I find about it is a lot of people had issues with it starting out, particularly people who are therapists or like, I don't know, have maybe you have been in therapy and we're like because the gist of the show is that like the main character because he's kind of fallen off the wagon and he doesn't know what he's doing anymore starts crossing boundaries with his patients like kind of intruding into their personal life and like messing about he calls this gymming and a lot of people were like, but this is not how therapy works. This is not how these people do their job in real life, and that is so responsible. And I'm like, have you all forgotten what fiction is?
Right, right.
Um, but when Eric and I first met, which was at OAH Historians Conference in LA, which was right after the first season had aired, we were having a margarita, and Eric was like, "Let me talk about shrinking because my theory about shrinking is that it is a show about boundaries and basically people also violating these boundaries and negotiating these boundaries." So I think that is very true. So maybe you want to elaborate a little on this because I think there's more to say.
Like a lot of academics, I'm incapable of enjoying something without also having a theory about it. So
Yeah.
this is where I get engaged. But yeah, I mean, I think that like a lot of sitcoms, right? One of the things that you want out of a sitcom is that it's a good hang. You want to be with the characters, and so the appeal of Shrinking is that these characters and Jimmy's therapy, as you point out, Sabrina, are about dropping boundaries. They're always in and out of each other's business. As you said at the top, Alice has to be raised by the neighbors. Uh, Derek is often literally overseeing Jimmy's yard from his balcony, that he also relieves himself off of frequently and it's everyone's talking about things that frankly in real life would often be inappropriate, right? Not just from a professionally therapeutic standpoint, but just, from kind of basic interpersonal respect, right? There's a lot of that going on. And I think that, so the show is kind of asking us to consider, isn't it fun to see all these characters having fun by being more relaxed with each other? It's obviously important to Jimmy that these social barriers get broken down. It's important to Paul, Harrison Ford's character, that he lets down his boundaries, that he is sort of able to express his feelings, even though it's, as you point out, Sabrina, in a way that is definitely fictional. We wouldn't like this in real life, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys. I don't want Derek peeing in my yard. So that's Ted McGinley is great, but there are limits, right? So I think that's the show kind of, in as much as it had an idea to start out with, it was like, where do we go if we let down these boundaries? Maybe it's nice.
Yeah. Um, Kevin, do you have anything? I don't want to cut you off if you. Hey,
No, I don't want to. I don't want to violate Eric's boundaries. I think that was very well said. But I mean, one of the things that struck me about the show is that, um, and again, as Eric noted, it's supposed to be a good hang, and in a good hang, our friends get along, right? And our friends get along with it, and so there's an easy banter between these characters, which is kind of natural to sitcoms, and the lines don't come that easy in real life. The engagements don't come off that nice, but they are a good hang, and they cross all their boundaries together. And it's not just the therapist crossing boundaries; it's all there's also a kind of a related theme here in the part of oh god, now I'm blanking on his name. The Yuri character, the best friend.
Brian, isn't it?
Brian, sorry. Yeah. So Brian is the epitome of selfishness, right? Brian is somebody who says over and over again he does not care about anyone but himself. Everything comes up his way. He constantly, this is mantra, right? And he's constantly thinking about himself. And even that character has to learn, or not the hassle, but shows that that's something that's almost an act, right? He constantly is tearing down these walls. He's insists he's created. He's constantly doing things to help out his friends, to let people in, and as we go on in later seasons, to get married, to have a kid, to think about his partner's job over his own happiness, even if it means, God forbid, moving to my home state of Tennessee from Los Angeles. He's willing to do it, right? So it's a tale of growth and overcoming self-imposed boundaries, as much as the kind of the boundaries that might be between professional and a patient, or between friends and neighbors. It's all kinds of erasing of those lines.
Yeah, and I think there's a thing about also the old adage of like it takes a village, right? I mean, particularly the
Right.
thing of like she's literally raising his daughter for a while, but just the fact that I think if somebody is going through something as traumatic as like losing their partner or their mother in an accident,
Hmm.
then maybe we don't need to do, but there's maybe no way for us to get out of this by ourselves. And
Yeah.
maybe even
Yeah.
smaller crises like that. And just generally, and I think that that is also what the show ends up on of like, okay, maybe there's just you need to cross these boundaries sometimes to
Hmm.
actually survive. Um, and I mean, maybe this is no coincidence that it happened, like that show comes out after COVID as well, where it's like we had so many physical boundaries with each other, and all we ever did was talk on Zoom like this, but sometimes it broke
Yeah.
down other boundaries because suddenly we were in each other's homes. I mean, right now it's blurry, but you could see my bed behind me and there's my cats on it, and you know what I mean? And like we all did our work meetings, and there were all these instances of people like not realizing they had their camera on, and funny things happened, and people were doing interviews on, I don't know, the BBC, and the cat walked through, and I feel like there's that, and then in the end, like we only got through this because we're doing it together, and then people who were narcissistic in that were, were obviously the bad guys in many ways, but also
Hmm.
like realized very quickly that maybe they also couldn't make it without other people anymore. Um, so I don't know how much it is born out of the zeitgeist, but it feels maybe less than coincidental.
Well,
Um,
I think you're right. I think it does belong in a kind of list of shows that are about processing the pandemic because, as you know, is famously the case, we have not dealt, sort of directly with it. And as any number of historians will tell you, that was true also of the flu pandemic in 1919, that it sort of people just sort of shoved it down and repressed it, right? And it barely appears. So, that I think of maybe like for me, like Station 11 obviously was one of
Mhm.
those shows, which is also about grief and, was of course produced before the pandemic, but then said a lot to us about the pandemic. And Shrinking sort of belongs in that category of a show that allows us to do some processing of those griefs and barriers and lost months, if not years. So.
Yeah. I'm also like, I mean, in the academic settings where we exist, and I think there's, I mean, obviously all professional settings might do this, but I feel like in academia particularly, we have a very hierarchical system. We have a patriarchal system, obviously,
Hmm.
but it's also a lot about like respecting people's status, maybe not crossing certain boundaries because of that all the time. And if I wonder how much of that also broke down in COVID, or maybe didn't break down enough in COVID sometimes. And I don't know, and I feel like that's a thing like that I encounter a lot because I tend to be very unfiltered to the degree where I'm now doing it just like out of spite because I feel like we might benefit from this. I don't think we would sit here if I wasn't like this. But also it can lead to so many good things like us sitting here and just talking about this TV show. Um
Hmm.
or also again, like meeting Eric and it's like just having a margarita together and like status wise, maybe that isn't what we're supposed to do. Like you're not supposed to hang with like a full professor at a conference. The first thing you do when you meet is like have a margarita. But like nothing untoward obviously happened. And I mean, this is not, and I think this is also what the show is saying, or other texts by the same creators have made the point of, I think, is that boundary crossing, obviously there is a line to it, and we don't it's never supposed to be something that hurts somebody in any way,
Right.
but sometimes circumventing them or just breaking them down can only be actually just be to our benefit and just
Yeah.
you know, we're all people at the end of the
Right.
day.
And there are, and we should note that the series does show that there are limits to boundary crossing. I think most famously at the end of the first season, when a patient took Jimmy a little too far and pushed her abusive boyfriend off a cliff. Or even on a smaller level, like one of the idiot neighbor sons constantly barging into Jimmy's house to raid the fridge, right? And he rolls his eyes at that, right? He recognizes that there are problems there. Or talking about Sean being out in the pool house a little too long for that relationship, and maybe they need to move on, and this is not healthy, right? So it's not an unquestioning acceptance of that. But I do think it fits with that COVID pandemic moment. As you said, we suddenly got even blurred. We got an insight into people's private lives that they hadn't seen before. More people saw this is we're in my kitchen now. More people saw the inside of my kitchen than had ever seen it before through COVID. People my dog was constantly interrupting classes. My kids would walk by in the background. People got a shot at our inner lives, and it broke down at least at some level that kind of formal hierarchical structure. So it's still there in the show, right? The patients have a relationship with a therapist that's got some obviously power imbalance, or even within the practice. Jason Segel constantly trying to curry favor from his mentor, Harrison Ford, or the parents and their kids, right? They're constantly testing these relationships, and some of it they can be a little more elastic than we otherwise might have thought. That bending the rules, if not breaking them, can be healthy.
Yeah, I mean, and so in the specifics, right? Sean clearly benefits from the Jimmying intervention, right?
Hmm.
He's the character where we see that he starts out in a very bad place. He's got PTSD, he's prone to violence, and over the 3 seasons right now, we're not worried about him anymore, I don't think, right?
Right.
He's ready to leave the pool house. But because it is a sitcom and not a treatise, it's not making a clear argument about why it's good for Sean and bad for Heidi Gardner's character. And in fact, the show has really run away from the whole Jimmy concept. I think, that it's sort of well, when the Gabby had Jimmy come talk to her class, and they all of a sudden jumped on him for violating literally every professional ethic that there
Yes.
is, right? It
Yeah.
clearly knows that it can't really make that an argument, but it's something it wants you to think about or feel,
Hmm.
that this might be
But it
maybe slightly less with the boundaries, I guess.
I mean, I also think that it is meant to show Jimmy's own progress because, as he
Right.
also admits throughout, he only does this to save himself. Like going
Yeah.
back to narcissism, he's doing this more for his own benefit than for his patients. And as soon as
Hmm.
that becomes true, this becomes the really bad thing. And I think this is really it. Like maybe with Sean when he's starting, because it's the first one he's starting this out with, I think, and he's a new patient and I don't know, I think there's maybe still more of a sense to him really wanting to help him because he clearly has that issue. And I think with the other patients, particularly Hardy Gardner's character, he also just becomes frustrated with them and he's just fed up with her complaining about her abusive
Right.
husband every
Right.
session and basically goes, just fucking do something, which is maybe not the worst thing to say, but it also, because she's in such a volatile situation, would lead to something bad eventually.
Hmm.
So I think there's also that, and the show knows that. And I mean, the fact that the guy doesn't die, just gets injured, obviously has to do with the tone of the show of like maybe not having to want to deal with her having to be tried for like I mean murder, manslaughter, whatever whatever it would be ruled as, but it doesn't matter. Like that is not something they want on their conscience or the
Yeah.
character's conscience as well, because otherwise you would have to deal with this very differently going forward.
That was one of the things that scared me the most at the end of the first season. I thought, oh fuck, they're finally going to deal with the consequences of
Yeah.
this. Now we're going to turn serious. Now we're going to dig into it. They're going to have a trial and the repercussions. He's going to get this part, and they just sort of skipped right past it at the start of season two and kept on moving. And I think it was a brilliant choice to leave that plot line behind and instead dive into what was actually enjoyable and relatable and accessible about the show.
Yeah. I mean, there's also like an uh after we also get to fight like what they also sidestep for such a long time is how the wife actually died, right? Like this is not something we
Yeah.
deal with for the longest time. I do think we get some mention that there was an accident, like a car accident. I think that we
Hmm.
know, but there's no dealing with this until later on in the show, which has also to do with like the processing of the grief around it. You, for the longest time, you don't actually talk about the thing that happened. It takes such a long time for people to come around to be able to think process this. So I think that is also an intentional narrative choice to not dwell on this that early on because they're still in the midst of this. And then when we find out, suddenly we get to know the drunk driver who's responsible, who's played by Brett Goldstein. And from the moment he's played by Brett Goldstein, I think it's clear he's probably gonna play a bigger role and they're probably gonna do something with him. And they end up kind of incorporating him majorly into the storyline because both Jimmy and Alice become friends with him. At least Alice does at first. And it's this very weird trajectory, obviously, where suddenly they become close to this man who killed their family member.
Hmm.
But we also quickly learn that, of course, like it is one of those things. He isn't even an alcoholic, which would be another discourse altogether. He's just a guy who went out with his girlfriend for dinner, had like a couple drinks with dinner, drove, had an accident. He was fine, she was fine, but then this woman died. Um, which immediately is like, okay, well, that could be some of us. Maybe not all of us, but like
Hmm.
this seems like in the realm of something that might just happen. And and I know people were criticizing online that this storyline is the least realistic thing that would ever happen, that like somebody befriends somebody that killed their loved one. But apparently that happened. Like I don't know whom, but like Bill Lawrence has said this is based on somebody's true
Yeah.
life.
It's a really interesting choice that they made that such a big arc, not just because it's maybe implausible, even if it had a basis in truth, but because it's less a story about coming to terms with grief and more a story about coming to terms with anger, right? about letting go of that desire for revenge and retribution, and that I think is a really interesting choice there. All right, and it's something that we haven't, or at least I hadn't seen from a lot of these shows. I've seen the dealing with grief. That was certainly a through line with Scrubs. We saw multiple plot lines of people. That remember episode with Brendan Fraser passing, where Dr. Cox had to deal with that. That kind of sense of loss in your life. And this is less about a sense of loss and more about coming to terms with what you robbed yourself, right? That anger, that grudge is something that I think only does harm to the individual, right? Holding it, right? And so that's, I think, a powerful message. And this is one that's common in therapy. It's not that they're pioneering anything new in therapy, but I think for the television show, that was a really interesting arc to take of really feeling Jimmy's anger with the Brett Goldstein character, and him finally coming to terms with that and releasing it, not just for the good of the man who killed his wife, but for his own good, right? That he had to move past it, right? And that's again something that I think resonates, maybe not in the COVID era, but certainly in the Trump era, of this kind of feeling of inchoate rage that everyone has out there. And what do I do with that, right? And there's a certain sense here of not ignoring it, but at least learning to live with it, learning to find a way to navigate your daily life in a way in which this hatred, however real it might be, no one's going to say you shouldn't be mad at the man who killed your wife, right? I mean, that's, I think, an obvious thing. So this is a rational hatred. You can understand and excuse it, but it's still not good for you, right? It's still something that you have to come to terms with for your own sanity, your own safety.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Kevin. I mean, if the show started out with grief and COVID, it's moved into, as you say, the era of Trump and this inchoate rage. And this last season was very much about, what do you do with this anger? It's not helping you, you know? And so, yes, Jimmy and Alice can accept Lewis, but the show's also very clear that not everyone has to accept Lewis, right? That Gabby can't accept Lewis.
Right,
And
right.
it's probably not good for Lewis, in fact, to hang out with all these people who are justifiably angry with him, that he has to move on, right? And, and then Jimmy also justifiably angry at his father, Randy,
Mm,
and Harrison Ford tells him he has to express that to his father, but it doesn't do any good. His father's not going to change, right? He has to express it and then move on from that, right? And then, of course, my favorite character, who is a trivial character, but I think also helps us with knowing how you can forgive people and not forgive people. Racist Pam, right? Racist Pam never gets to hang out, right? You can't
yep,
forgive racist Pam. You don't have to be angry at racist Pam, but also, she's not going to be hanging out in the kitchen with Jimmy and Sean and everybody else, right?
that's right.
Yeah, no, it's not definitely not trying to make the argument about the Trump era that you have to hang out with the white supremacists next door. I mean, not that Pam is per se maybe one, but she's at least a casual racist, and even those you don't need to invite to your home if they're not, because they're probably not gonna change, or at least that is not the argument that the show wants to take. I mean, I'm not saying that show has perfect racial politics. It's still very much about rich white people for the most part. There's Gabby, of course, and I think this also broadens in the as the seasons go on. They have a certain self-awareness about that. There are enough comments. Also, Sean makes the comment of like, don't like, I love it so much to be like, I don't know, helped out by white people. Like the discourse exists, right? It is
Yeah.
certainly there. That doesn't always excuse it. It's still a show that's created by two white men as well, and three white men as well. And then like the writers' room is more diverse, but I think it still obviously exists. It's also, I mean, it's also in Pasadena, right? It is a
Right.
very, very like at least that part of Pasadena is a white neighborhood. They also have that interesting thing that they film partially also in Altadena, and they have a lot of people who worked on the show from Altadena, which is a historically black neighborhood that burned down in the fires, and they were doing the show while the fires were going on. So I think
Mm,
season three, I mean, they were already, um, I don't know if it's fully written, but I think there's also a moment where the LA fires inform this going
Mm,
forward. Like literally because they had to go back, they shoot the stuff they shoot on location, the houses that like Jimmy lives in and Liz and Derek live in, are there in Altadena, and they needed to like reschedule because the streets weren't cleaned up, but they
mm,
survived the fire. But like there was a lot of like logistics, and I think yeah, people who worked on the show lost their home. So I think there's
wow.
certain other sensibility going in, and in season three, like Liz is constantly wearing like these kind of charity shirts for LA wildfire relief and whatever. And
Mm,
it's always, I think, unconsciously there, which is another thing of our time, right? Like suddenly we also have the climate crisis to deal with. And it's just, and like so the constant the anger at that and the hopelessness at that and the grief about that, I think is also there. Maybe more than they ever planned because they wouldn't know this would happen. But I think it informs that too. Like this is another anger as well. That's there. And I think also holding on to the anger, as you said, it's no good for anybody. It will eat you
mhm,
alive. I think the other conscious choice with like the like Lewis who killed their wife and mother is also they see that like this has almost killed him, right? Like
mhm.
this he doesn't go on with his life. It leads to the end of his relationship. He can't hold the job that he used to have. He's now working in a cafe somewhere, so just to get by
Making terrible coffee.
and
Terrible
making
coffee.
completely terrible coffee. Like his life is completely on hold ever since that happened. So for him,
Hmm.
that tragedy happened too. And then of course we get to the climax of the second season where he is close to committing suicide. Um,
Hmm.
and the show doesn't let him, obviously. Like Jimmy has to be the one to come to him and say, like, essentially, what good does it do for somebody else to die? Like, how would, like, this doesn't bring my wife back. This doesn't, like, this would even put you, like, your death potentially on my guilty conscience. But even if it's
Hmm.
not that, like, that is not gonna solve anything. More grief, more death is never gonna solve anything. I think is also the message, clear message of that. And then after he slowly gets to move on when they really push him to. But he also needs Gabby to push him because he's like, I don't
Right,
even want you around. Like, just live
right,
your
right.
fucking life because my
Hmm.
friend can't anymore. Um, yeah. Mm. By the way, I have my
Speaking,
very Gabby water battle.
that's a very
Okay.
impressive level of hydration. Yeah,
Yeah.
another positive message from the show.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk about was, and what drew me to the show originally, and has impressed the hell out of me as they go on, is how deep this cast is. And I mean deep in terms of not just it's got more than a dozen, maybe 2 dozen phenomenal actors, but they're actors who have deep careers, right? So for me, this was seeing, we talked about it as a good hang. This is seeing a lot of old friends from past shows come back, right? So Krista Miller, who's married to Bill Lawrence, way back on Drew Carey show, certainly hilarious. Wendy Malick from way back. Ted McGinley, who used to have. I've never been happier for a total stranger than I've been happy for Ted McGinley to finally have a show that not only lived on after he joined it. He had a reputation as coming
Yeah.
on late in shows and killing them off. He killed off the Love Boat. He killed off Happy Days. It was unfair. He was a utility player they brought in when things were already going bad. And he was on this one from the start and has just an absolutely perfect role where he's not the dickhead. He's not the asshole. He's not the Revenge of the Nerds bad guy, right? He is somebody who is just pure love. And that's why his line, and I'm going to say the line I wanted to say, his eat a dick Pam line is so deadly funny, is that he is the nicest person on the show. You don't realize it. So we get McGinley, we get Damon Wayans Jr., we get Jessica Williams. I saw they've cast Christian Slater for season 4. I don't know if you saw that. They're bringing in Karen Gillum as
Mhm.
well. It's just the cast is getting deeper and deeper, and so it's an all-star level of talent, and it's with well-known comedic players and people like Harrison Ford, who we haven't really gotten to see play a lot of comedy before, really getting into it. So the level of talent here is just off the chart. So the themes are certainly important, they're certainly resonant with our time, but I don't think we can overlook the fact that this is just really an incredibly well staffed, well cast sitcom.
Well, and specifically putting Harrison Ford in that role. I mean, first of all, he's always been funny. Well, maybe not in his 90s grim thriller era, but generally speaking, he's always been funny,
Yeah.
right? And but for people Jason Segel's age, Brett Goldstein's age, our age, he's always been kind of, if not a dad figure, than avuncular older. That's
Hmm.
Han Solo, right? That's who Han Solo is. And maybe we can talk a little bit about this. I mean, a lot of people said that the end of the third season should have been the series finale, but of course, the place the show hasn't gone is Paul dying, right?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's kind of where I think Jimmy has to go through that, right?
Yeah.
And processing the death of a father figure like that, who has been, as I say, as Harrison Ford has been like a father figure for a generation, is clearly a hurdle they have to get over, I think.
Yeah.
Hmm.
A friend of mine like texted me at some point because clearly through the third season you have moments where you think maybe they're gonna kill him off. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole premise also that we haven't discussed is that like he has Parkinson's, he get up and that is informed by the fact that both Bill Lawrence and Brett Goldstein's fathers have Parkinson's. Um,
Mm.
and they had to deal with that. So it's clearly that. And again, as you say, I mean, honestly, Harrison Ford has been a figure for more than one generation. I think it's at least two or three by now. And a friend texted me was like, I think shrinking is supposed to prepare us for Harrison Ford's death.
I think that's completely
Yeah, I
correct.
think so.
As a
I think so.
civilization.
Yeah.
We've been
Because
through
I will
COVID, we've been through the Trump year and the LA fires, but we still have to get through Harrison Ford dying. It's,
Yeah, and
it's one of
it's
those.
gonna be tough. I am born in 1989. I still grew up with this stuff. I still grew up with the original Star Wars trilogy, with the Indiana Jones movies, with all the stuff he did after, but particularly those things. And like I have been in love with him since I was 8 years old. So there's also that dimension. You are a straight man, so probably that doesn't figure into this, and not want to assume as far
No,
as I
but
know. But
I went for Halloween one year as Han Solo. I went for Halloween another year as Indiana Jones. Okay, this is.
yeah, it's still
I
like
mean,
we all have like
yeah,
massive entanglements with this man, but also because he seems to be such a good person in real life,
yeah,
which you rarely get. Like especially after he's in his 80s. Like at some point, if there had been really bad dirt on him, I think we've would
right,
have found
yeah,
out. I mean, he's not. He still cheated on his wife with Carrie Fisher, which she also let us know before she died. Which I'm like, I would let people know. I mean, not that we didn't kind of know that they probably had,
right.
but like, it's bad. Like, if he's gonna die, it's gonna be bad.
Hmm. I mean, he's gonna die. I don't think he's immortal. So I think we do
No, but
need.
like, I
He
mean,
drank
I think
from
we
the
do.
Holy Grail, Kevin.
I mean,
Yeah,
there you
okay,
never
but in canon, Eric. No.
you chose wisely. Which he also gets to say in the show, which is hilarious.
Right, right, right.
Um, yeah, yeah, funny detail because they had like like they referenced Indiana Jones directly twice, and I think they waited till later on in the show because Harrison Ford famously doesn't like to do that stuff or is
Yep.
just not as invested. He doesn't hate it. He's one of those, he always says like he considers actor to be a service position for the people who
Hmm.
watch the show. So he's very much, he doesn't care. He comes back to old franchises if they ask him. He did Star Wars again, he did Indiana Jones again, he did the Blade Runner stuff. He just doesn't watch that stuff. He isn't a nerd. Like he
Yeah.
isn't in those fandoms himself. He never gets the references. Like, and I believe him when he said he didn't get the reference to the Indiana
Oh,
Jones.
totally,
He
totally. Yeah.
quote said, I thought it's just the melody that everybody knows. And I'm like, yes, it is Harrison. It is because it is Indiana Jones and you are Indiana
Hmm.
Well, this does, of course, raise the very pressing question of in the shrinking universe, who plays Indiana Jones,
Jones.
right?
I choose to believe it's Tom Selleck. It was the original
I
cast.
it,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but who is Han Solo then? Like,
Christopher Walken.
oh my God.
There you go. Yeah.
More cowbell. But yeah. But yeah, no, I think I was seriously afraid that he was gonna pass before the show was over.
Yeah.
They would have to deal with it this way, which of course some TV shows had to go through that and deal with somebody's sudden death. So yeah, maybe that's
They had
really
to
what.
keep him away from the pilot's yoke for the rest of the series
Yes.
because
Seriously.
yeah.
Yeah. You should not be flying.
Yeah, I think you absolutely will, but
Yeah. Who's going to stop Harrison Ford?
no one. That is the answer, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's also wild that he signed on, and I mean, he keeps saying it's the best job he ever had, which I also kind of believe because it is really a character that is written for him in many ways, and that
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not one of those kind of like fantasy iconic characters. I mean, he also shaped them into what they are, but like this is still much closer to home for him in so many ways. I mean, we already said he's grumpy. Like Harrison Ford is naturally grumpy. He's always been grumpy
Yeah.
and kind of dryly funny, and like he gets to do all these things that he hasn't gotten to do.
If only he could smoke weed on the show like he does in real life. I think he finally
I
be
mean, we
fulfilled.
got that one episode where he's super high
Oh, that's right. That's
accident.
right. By accident. Yeah.
So that at least was in
All
there.
right. That's right. Okay. All right. Checked all the boxes. That's fine. We're done.
Yeah, for people who don't know, Harrison Ford used to be a weed dealer. When before he made it
Yes.
big, he was Hollywood's go-to weed dealer.
I assume you know that famous story about the Star Wars premiere where somebody hollered out, "Hey, that's my weed dealer," when he
Yeah,
came on the screen.
I think I think from the Mamas and the Papas. Somebody,
I think that's correct. Yes.
famous
Michelle
singer.
Phillips or somebody like that.
I've
I
Yes.
think
never heard that.
somebody
That's
like that was it,
fantastic.
and was like, "Hey, that's."
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so he's just, I don't know. Yeah, I just hope he makes it until the film season 4, and then if he
Yeah.
doesn't die on the show, then at least we can still live in the thought that he's alive in real life. But yeah,
Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed, I guess. Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that I wanted to bring up is because we have touched upon it is like this is you want this to be a good hang, and people keep saying it's a hangout show, and I don't think this is per se wrong in the sense of like, sure, we want to spend time with these characters and we do see the characters hang out with each other. Um, but I think like my pet peeve is that too many like journalists were like, yeah, but they should have really leaned into this more in season 3. This is clearly where the strength of the show is. Basically why did it get so saccharine and why are they still talking about grief? And I'm like, because that is what the show is
That's a
about.
show.
That's the
Yeah,
show.
it's not a hangout show in the way in which like Friends is or Seinfeld,
Yeah,
where it
or
can be
even
on in the
Cougar
background.
Town that I think people
Even
keep
Cougar
coming
Town.
back to because it's just
Yeah,
Bill Lawrence. But
yeah, or even Scrubs. Scrubs would be a hangout show where it's kind of on in the background, and you can drop the needle on any episode, and it's kind of tonally the same, and it's like checking in with old friends. This is a show where the stories do, I think, progress over the season in a meaningful way. Where there is character growth and there are emotional beats, but it's always got an undercurrent of depth. And again, that's what makes, I think, the humor pop on this show is that, and maybe I think that's one of the reasons I really like it. I have a thing for gallows humor. There's a reason I took to social media during the Trump era because I had to get I couldn't just text all my bad jokes to Eric, and my wife was sick of hearing them, so I had to get them out. And so I think there's something therapeutic about that in kind of fraught times to have that kind of dark gut level. The more inappropriate, the better humor, right? And to lead into that, and it again dovetails with the show's themes about boundaries, as Eric raised, right? And so they cross a lot of boundaries in not just personal space, professional space, but humor, all right? And there's a lot of stuff here that where they're joking about the dead mom or playing the dead mom card too much
Right, right.
or all the sexual stuff it's got a very kind of light touch on these things that otherwise could be very heavy-handed. And again, I think that fits where we're at really well.
I mean, Sabrina, you pointed out that it's a show created by three straight white men, and that's obviously comes through in many parts of the show. But I think that ultimately they're coming to a kind of conclusion that I think is also the theme of Angels in America, which is about processing the AIDS pandemic and its
Mm.
place in culture. And I don't know if you remember, the conclusion is more life, right? That's the
I
only
have
thing that we
I have
have.
that tattooed on my arm. I do
All
remember.
right, well there you go. So I guess you do remember that, right? And I think that's clearly the kind of only remedy this show can offer to its various traumas also, right? Is that it's more life is the only solution to the sadness that we live in, and it wants to hit that theme. It doesn't just want to be a hangout show, right? It wants to address that. So
Hmm.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that is also part of it of like, again, if you want to have more life, maybe sometimes you need to cross the boundary. Maybe sometimes you need to form relationships you didn't have before or deepen your relationship with somebody that you kind of knew more casual or in a different context or whatever. I mean, it's no coincidence that like in the first season, Jimmy and Gabby start sleeping together, which is definitely part of them processing their grief. They were never going to do more with this, but it's just they have each other and that all these emotions that they have need to go somewhere, right? And I mean
Hmm.
they didn't pursue this further, but it made sense in the moment, but it was another boundary being crossed of like what are we now? Are we more than friends now? All of this stuff. And I mean, this is also again where a lot of the humor comes from. It's just people also talking about sex, talking about these things they shouldn't be talking about maybe that openly with each other, but they do. And I mean, like, this is also weird. There's so many good jokes come from on the show. I mean, one of my favorite things is in that context where it's like he compares her vagina to Florida because it's like humid and hospitable. But like, it's so bad. It's like, but like those kind of crass jokes, and I actually earlier today recorded a podcast on Office Romance, which is the Netflix rom-com that Brett Goldstein just wrote with Joe Kelly, who also did Ted Lasso, and J-Lo is on it. But like that also has gotten a lot of mixed reviews and people being outraged about the fact that it has more crass jokes and humor, more like the Judd Apatow kind of rom-coms, but there's just it's like, okay, well, I wasn't that surprised by the fact that there were going to be dick jokes in this, or because, and that show is also, that film is also completely about, like, again, it's an office romance, like negotiating the boundaries of like romance in the
Hmm.
workplace, but also there's like, he's the British guy in the American office, and people want to just constantly has an assistant who always overshares everything about her life, and he's kind of like, this we're in the workplace. I don't want to hear about your like dating life or your family or your illness or whatever. And then obviously
Hmm.
the movie moves towards like making a case for that maybe you can also have family at work, like more the American approach, but it's very clearly invested in like saying maybe sometimes it's fine to cross certain boundaries. Again, not violating boundaries that people don't want to have violated, but maybe just loosening up a little bit. And I don't think that it's a coincidence. It's clearly kind of the themes that all of these
Hmm.
circle around. I mean, Rooster, you mentioned that early on, Kevin,
Right.
also doing that, which is set on a campus, which, is
Yes.
like one of the few things we get in a university setting. And people also hated that. And like, oh, they didn't hate the show, but they don't think it's doing that particularly well, which I find interesting. But
Yeah,
again,
and the rooster on campus. I think now professors are going to say the same things that the actual therapist said about the show. This isn't, that's not how tenure works. That's not how this. There are a lot of like glaring things. John McGinley taking his grad student female mentor into the sauna box with him. That's not going to happen. Okay, for a variety of reasons, and yet the larger message there about, or my God, Steve Carell going out and drinking with his students and getting hot, and that's not going to happen, but or
Oh, I
shouldn't
know
happen.
people who have done
Yeah.
that, and it was.
Look, we're not going to bring up Eric here, but look, but so there are all the kinds of obvious mistakes there, and yet don't think of this. Literally, it's about again breaking down these false hierarchies, seeing the humanity in each other, helping people out, not thinking that I'm above or below somebody, but rather treating them as fellow human beings, right? I mean, it's a universal message, and we've seen it across all these different shows now. And again, thinking about the places he's gone from hospital to therapy to university, places that hold a certain kind of foundational role in a lot of our lives, right? And places that we've been in and out of and haven't quite and have maybe put them in certain boxes, right? And again, it's about breaking down those walls, breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, a number of people have recommended Rooster to me, and I haven't watched it for basically precisely that reason. I mean, ultimately, uh, I can't watch shows that are that off base about
Yeah.
things that are that close to home for me, right? I mean, the only academic fiction I think that is realistic is Lucky Hank. That's where the chair of the department is deposed by a vote of no confidence and immediately reinstated because nobody else wants to do it. That's academic realism, right? I mean, the that yeah,
This one is close to Lucky Hank. It's not like the chair.
okay.
It's not like one of these ones where
Yeah,
the faculty have these palatial Gothic offices, and they you know walk
right.
around constantly looking like they're walked out of a J. Crew ad with a coffee in their hand and a meerschaum pipe. The faculty are a mess. I think that's one of the things that the faculty are normal human beings with all kinds of fucked up problems, and it takes them down from the pedestal. That's what I like. Just ignore
Yeah.
everything about how a university is run, and you'll maintain some sanity.
Yeah,
I,
although I
I I
mean,
accept that. It's just I'm a big in my real life. I'm more like Paul, whereas a big boundaries guy don't want
Yeah.
to talk about. And it for me, therefore, it has to be some kind of fantastic location, like let's say Southern California, that's not real, and that's fine for me. Frankly, the first time I ever encountered Jason Segel was when my kids were small. His Muppets movie came out, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is somebody who knows how to handle things that aren't real, a universe that isn't real, and yet deal with real issues in it. That was
Mm.
why I was drawn to Shrinking Frankly in the first place.
yeah. And I mean, I think it's so coincident. Like, Brett Goldstein is the other, like, insanely obsessed with the Muppets person, and I think they have that immediate common ground of like they know the Muppets, and I think there's a weird sensibility to this too because I mean, really thinking about it, isn't the Muppet Show also about a workplace where people are just constantly running around, not
Well, it's
knowing
also
what
about
they're
breaking the
doing?
boundaries there of the fourth wall, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
literally that, but also, I mean, everybody, Kermit and Piggy have an ongoing thing that never goes anywhere. Everyone else is saying somebody's dating a chicken. Like, it's, I don't know. Like, I mean, they literally did that workplace comedy with the Muppets as well, right? I don't know if you watched
Right.
that. At least over here, that's on Disney Plus still. They did like one season of this, like, very adult folk geared workplace sitcom just called The Muppets. And it was hilarious because suddenly they had the Muppets making these very adult jokes. It was basically like somebody like them had written
Huh.
the show. It was insane. Like it is insinuated Beaker and Honeydew have an affair. There's a lot going on with it. It's
I
like
think we need to do another separate hour on the Muppets, clearly.
yes, please. But I think
So
there's a sensibility there, and I do think that maybe when people say the characters aren't shrinking, don't behave realistically, because people also tend to say that about the dialogue and like how what choices people make. It's fiction, but B, maybe it's also because they're all kind of Muppets when we really think.
Right.
But maybe this is now my overarching thesis. Maybe we're all more Muppet than we care to admit.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we're close to an
I,
hour on this.
I think our time is up.
I think our time is enough. Yes.
I think we've done, Eric said very profound things about more life. We ended up somehow on the Muppets. We got an Eat a Dick Pam. I think we're golden. So
Mission
yeah,
accomplished.
I'm gonna stop this recording.